Today I'm going to take a look at the Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix for 2004. Now, as the name implies, Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix uses the Cinnamon desktop environment, and it's a remix of Ubuntu. It is not an official flavor, at least not yet. They have plans hopefully to become an official flavor, but that hasn't happened yet. And if you want to grab their ISO, what you need to do is go to SourceForge. Now, they're hosted on SourceForge. They don't have a proper website set up yet. They do own the domain ubuntucinnamon.org, but when you go to it, it's just a blank page right now. It hasn't been set up yet. But if you go to SourceForge, you can grab the latest ISO, which is about 18 days old, the last time they put out an ISO. Cinnamon Remix 2004 Unstable. And of course, why they have unstable in the name of that ISO is because it's based off Ubuntu 2004 Focal Fossa. That has not been released yet. Ubuntu 2004 will not be released for another 2 months. So since they're basing off of that, they're really basing off a beta version of Ubuntu. So this is very much beta software. I would not recommend you guys run this on a production machine. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix 2004 inside VirtualBox. So I created a VM, a virtual machine. I gave this virtual machine 2 threads of my 24-thread Threadripper. I gave the VM 4 gigs of RAM. And I also gave the VM a 20 gigabyte hard drive. You need to do that for Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. You need to make sure you give it enough system resources, or you're not going to be able to run the installer. The installer is going to throw up some warnings. You have to have at least a 16 gig hard drive, and you have to have at least 2 gigs of RAM on the system, or the installer is just going to give you a warning and you're not going to be able to run through the install process. So if I go to the menu system here, and I do a quick search for install, there is the installer. Let me go ahead and launch that. I really like the default wallpaper there, the Focal Fossa wallpaper. All right, welcome to Cinnamon Remix Installer. All right, I'm just going to run through this real quick. So it's already selected American English for the language. That's correct. It correctly chose the Central Time Zone in the US for me. That's correct. English US is the default keyboard. I don't need to change that. And what do we want to do? I want to erase the disk and let Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix have the entire 20 gig virtual hard drive. Now, if I was manually partitioning, I could do that if I needed to do some manual partitions myself. We need to create a username and password. You guys have seen the Calamares installer before. That's what they're using here, the Calamares installer. So I'm going to create a user. I'm going to call him DT. We need to create a strong and complicated password for the DT user. Right, do we want to log in automatically without being asked for a password? No. I want to have to enter my password when I log in. That's why I create such a strong and complicated password, for privacy reasons. All right, and the overview. Location looks good. Keyboard looks good. The partition scheme looks good. I'm just going to click install, and away we go. It's going to warn me that it's about to format the drive and write to the disk, so there's no coming back from this after you click install now. But this is a VM, so the only drive I'm wiping out is a virtual drive. This portion of the installer on most modern Linux distributions takes about 10 minutes. So I'm going to pause the video. I'll be back once the installer has completed. Now the installer has completed. That just took a few minutes to finish that install process. Now to finish the install process entirely, what you need to do is in the Calamares installer, you need to click Restart Now. It's already ticked on by default here in Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. And then what you need to do is you need to click this button that says Done. And your machine will reboot. And I'm going to do that right now. And I have rebooted the VM. Now we need to log in with the username and password we created. It's already got my username, DT here. I need to put in my strong and complicated password. Then hit enter. Let's see how long the Cinnamon desktop takes to load here. All right, that was pretty quick. It says check your video drivers. Now I am in a VM, and sometimes the Cinnamon desktop does not play well with VirtualBox, so just ignore those kinds of errors. We may get a few graphical glitches here, but again, this is in a VM. It's not on a physical machine. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go through the menu system and just see what kind of programs they install by default in Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. So we have an accessories category. We have our archive manager, probably the standard archive manager for GNOME. What is it? File Roller is the name. Yeah, Archive Manager 3.32.2. That's GNOME's archive manager. That's for zip, unzip, tar, those sorts of things. Also under accessories, we have our backups utility. This is distro.tube, which is a really nice backup program that is pretty standard in Ubuntu and most of the Ubuntu flavors. We also have our calculator, which is, of course, will probably be the GNOME calculator. We have files. Let's see what file manager they're using. Hopefully they're not using Nautilus. No, they're using Nemo. All right. A much better selection as far as a file manager. Nemo's not bad. We also have Genome Fonts. We have a help utility. If we click help, let's see what exactly we get. We get the Ubuntu desktop guide. Very nice. I actually wasn't aware Ubuntu shipped with something like that. That's really nice if you need some help documentation. Also under accessories, we have the plank dock. So how do I kill the plank dock? Because it's behind the panel too. So there we go. Control and then right click and then you can kill it. We have a screenshot utility. We have text info. We have the text editor. Let's see which text editor they're using. Looks like they're using gedit. Yeah, this is gedit 3.34. Gedit is a fine text editor though. We have an education category, and we have Libreoffice Math is the only program in that. We have a games category, and it looks like they ship with just some of the standard games, 2048, chess, mahjong, and Sudoku. Under graphics, we have our document scanner. They also ship with GIMP on the ISO. Very nice. A lot of distros these days, because they're trying to keep their ISOs small, they don't ship with GIMP, and I think pretty much everybody probably should. I think GIMP is one of the shining examples of what free and open source software can be. Under Internet, we have Firefox for our web browser and Thunderbird for our email client, both excellent choices. Under Office, we have the LibreOffice suite. We have Calc, Draw, Impress, Math, and Writer. We open up LibreOffice Writer here. It's our free and open source alternative to Microsoft Word. See what version we are on. The ISO is only about 3 weeks old, so it should be a recent version. Yeah, version 6.3.4.2. We have a sound and video category, but nothing is here other than a program called Celluloid. I've never heard of that. It is a multimedia player, though. Let's see, Celluloid 0.18. It's a GTK front end for MPV. So I guess that would serve as your audio and video player. And then we have an administration category for some of your system administration tools, things like gparted, htop, setting up your printers, our software center. We have the Synaptic package manager also here for a software center, if you will. The software center I'm sure they're using is the GNOME software utility. Yeah, it's not my favorite graphical software center, but typically I don't use any software center anyway. I just do everything at the command line. But those of you that like a graphical software center, the GNOME software is okay. Now, those of you that are looking for a better software center, the Synaptic package manager is also on the system. And if you run a Debian or an Ubuntu-based distribution and you need a graphical package manager, the Synaptic package manager is really the one you want to install. It's very easy to search and find software in this thing. If you wanted to, you could just do a search. For example, let me see if 0AD, the game 0AD, is in the repository. So I'm going to search for it. It's right here. I could click on it. I could get a screenshot of it. I could read a little bit about it. Or, I could right-click, mark for installation. It's going to tell me everything that it's going to install. I'm going to cancel that. Also under administration, we have our terminal, of course. Let's see what terminal they are using. Probably the GNOME terminal. Yeah. GNOME terminal 3.34.2, which is a nice terminal. Let's see what kernel we are on. I'm not sure what kernel the beta version of 2004 for Ubuntu is on right now. Looks like 5.4.0-12. That is a very recent kernel. Let's see if htop is on the system. It is. And for system resource usage right now, we're using very little CPU, but I'm not really doing anything that should require CPU. We are using 1 gig of the 4 gigs of RAM that I gave this VM. That's a little high, but I have opened and closed a ton of programs in the last couple of minutes, so that may be affecting it a little bit. If I did this on a cold boot, that number is probably going to be, more like 700-800 megs of RAM instead of a gig. By the way, while we're checking things out, does Control-Alt-T bring up a terminal? It does. So that's good. Most of the Ubuntus are good about that, is they always have at least that one key binding in every Ubuntu flavor is Control-Alt-T will bring up a terminal. We have a preferences category, and this would be some of your system settings stuff. Matter of fact, if you click the system settings, search for settings, there is system settings right here. And pretty much everything you see in preferences right here in system settings, you also have in this category here. So this would be where you find things like your account details, date and time, where you can play around with the screensaver, privacy settings, things like that. If I wanted to, let me click on, there was something I was interested in. What version of Cinnamon is Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix actually using? Okay, so they are using Cinnamon version 4.2.4. Now that is interesting because I run an Arch Linux-based distro, so I did a quick search in the Arch repository to see what version is the latest version of Cinnamon. Because Arch is a rolling release, it's always going to have the latest packages. And right now, Arch has Cinnamon 4.4.8 available. 4.4.8. And Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix 2004 is on 4.2.4. Now, they may be doing that for stability reasons. I'm assuming that's probably why they're doing that, is maybe having such a recent release of Cinnamon would introduce bugs, so they have to hold back a little bit. It's fine with me. I don't begrudge anybody for shipping with a little bit older software if it does provide a little better stability. Let me close the system settings. One thing I wanted to show you guys is there is a really cool layout tool here in Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. So if you just do a search for layout, and oddly enough, the Cinnamon menu here, at least in Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix, is not very good at finding programs based on description because layout. Why is LibreOffice Draw the first search result when I type layout? That makes absolutely no sense because the tool I want is actually called Panel Layout, and you would think it would be the first result, not the last. Anyway, Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix guys, if you watch this video, see if you can do a little bit better job on the search results in your menu system. Anyway, this is the Cinnamon layout tool, and you can see basically it will change the style of your desktop depending on what you choose here. Now, right now we are on the default setting, but you can do a traditional setting, which is Windows XP inspired layout. We can do a Redmond setting, which is Windows 7 inspired layout. The Cupertino setting, which of course is the Mac OS layout, and Unity, which mimics Ubuntu's Unity desktop environment. There's a widescreen layout, and then there is a Genome 2 layout with your traditional dual panel setup. So let me try the traditional Windows XP layout. I'm going to choose that and click OK. And it says it has updated. You will need to provide an administration password. Okay, well, I don't mind giving you my password to make changes to the system. All right, and did the menu system change? Everything kind of looks the same. It really didn't look. It says, please reboot your computer if you have any trouble. Well, I don't want to have to reboot, but that is weird that doesn't really look like it changed. If it changed anything, it didn't change much. So let's go back to the layout tool. This time I'm going to choose Redmond, which is the Windows 7 inspired layout. And the panel got a little wider. It's such minor changes that I'm not sure if it is even worth fooling with. Maybe I do need to reboot to get the full effect. Yeah, let me reboot just to see if it changed. So I'm on the Redmond layout. Let me go ahead and restart this VM just to see. All right, so I rebooted the VM. Just took about 5-10 seconds to reboot. Let's log back in. Yeah, so this is the Windows 7 inspired layout, the Redmond layout. I mean, the menu system is all the same. The panel, like I said, it got a little wider. You know, it's not as skinny as the traditional layout, but that's strange that you have these different layouts, but there's really not much difference between them. Let's try the Cupertino, which is the Mac OS layout. Now, this probably involves the plank dock because Mac OS 10 has a dock in its layout, so I'm assuming that's why the dock shipped on the system. Yes, okay, so that actually makes sense now. The plank dock at the bottom, we got the panel at the top. I go back and find the layout tool again. I typed layout and hit enter. And, of course, we're launching LibreOffice Draw. That's horrible. That's so bad. This is why I prefer things like D menu or setting up keyboard shortcuts for everything, is these traditional menu systems can be clunky sometimes, to be honest. Of course, I gotta type correctly to do anything. Let's try the Unity layout. Give it a password. Now, the Unity layout, I don't mind. That is a pretty clean layout. I could get used to that. Let me try one more. See what else was in the list. The widescreen. I don't have a widescreen monitor, so I'll skip that. But we do have the Genome 2 layout. That should give us the two panels, the one panel at the top and the one panel at the bottom. Yeah, that's very reminiscent of the old Genome 2 desktop environment. I think for me, what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to go with the Cupertino layout, the Mac OS 10 layout here. I'm going to go ahead and right click on the desktop. I'm going to click change desktop background. You guys know I have got to check out the wallpapers on everything, and the wallpaper pack is just a generic wallpaper pack. I can tell you this is the standard GNOME wallpaper pack, or it might be the standard Mate wallpaper pack, but I've seen these wallpapers before. You guys have probably seen most of these wallpapers before as well. If you're on a Debian or an Ubuntu based system, you have some generic wallpaper packs in the repos. There is GNOME-backgrounds. There's also Mate-backgrounds in the repos, and I believe this is one of those packs. I think it's the GNOME one. Anyway, some decent wallpapers, though. I don't hate the wallpapers. I think I'd go with something kind of simple, minimal looking. Yeah, that's not too bad. I kind of like the transparent panel. That was just a very quick look at the Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix 2004 and some of the interesting programs that ship with it. I kind of like the layout tool. The only problem is if you're going to ship with about 8 or 9 different layouts as selections in that tool, some of them are so minor, the changes, I'm not sure if it's even worth having those in the tool. The only ones that looked like they changed anything significantly were the Cupertino layout, the Mac-inspired layout, and the Unity layout. And I liked both of those. Those were really neat. And it looked like some of that may have been inspired by the Ubuntu Mate project, because the Ubuntu Mate, if you guys have ever run Ubuntu Mate, has a similar tool like that where you can change Mate to mimic Unity or Mac OS or Windows, depending on what you select in their layout utility. Now, right now, this is beta software, but in a couple of months, of course, Ubuntu 2004 will be released. And then, would you guys that like Cinnamon, is it worth it to you guys to run Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix over things like Linux Mint, for example? It may be. It depends. So the Linux Mint devs obviously are responsible for creating Cinnamon. They're the ones that make Cinnamon. So if you want a little bit more up-to-date Cinnamon desktop, you might run Linux Mint, but there's a downside. Linux Mint bases off of Ubuntu LTS releases. That's all they base off of. And the packages in Linux Mint are typically going to be older than the packages on your Ubuntu releases. So if you want a little bit newer packages on the system, you probably would consider Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. Again, because those packages on Linux Mint, especially the further you get away from the LTS release, those packages start to get really old and really crusty. Overall, my impressions of Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix, just taking a quick look at it is a nice implementation of the Cinnamon desktop environment. I really hope that they keep going with the project, and I hope that they become an official flavor of Ubuntu, because we already have so many official flavors of Ubuntu anyway. There's no reason not to have a Cinnamon flavor. You already have KDE, and you have XFCE, LXQ, Budgie. Let's go ahead and get a Cinnamon edition as well. Canonical, if you're listening, make it happen. Before I go, this channel is supported by you guys, the community. There are no corporate sponsors on this channel. Over the last couple of years, me doing this channel, I have been approached many times from various corporate sponsors, and I've turned them all down. I turned them all down because I don't want to be seen as a shill to any of these corporate sponsors, whether I like their product or not. It's just the optics of it, right? I don't really want to be one of those channels, but I do like being supported by the community. So you guys that support my work over on Patreon, this is your channel, and I'm talking about specifically The producers of the channel, I'm talking about Michael and Chris, DJ, Donnie, Dylan, George, Haplo, Nate, Lambda, Mitchell, Omri, Rob, Sean, Willie. These guys, they're the producers of this channel. Without these guys, this episode about Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix wouldn't have been possible. And this episode was also brought to you by all these other names you're seeing on the screen right now. These are all my supporters over on Patreon. Sincere thank you to each and every one of those ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like to support the channel, consider doing so. You'll find me at DistroTube over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace.